Kody and Robyn Brown were the ideal pair in the reality TV industry for many years. Millions of people had watched their love story, which was hailed as a union of loyalty, familial ties, and common goals. They were seen on camera planning holidays, laughing at family get-togethers, and creating a home that seemed pleasant and opulent. Their existence appeared to be perfect to the outer world. However, the illusion was meticulously preserved behind the lens. Ambitious and smart, Robyn had started looking into prospects that Kody didn't fully comprehend or maybe decided to overlook. Late-night meetings, hushed phone conversations, and abrupt, inexplicable shifts in family money were all subtle clues. Hopeful and trusting, Kody dismissed them as unimportant or necessary business. After all, he thought that love was stronger than anything. The family joyfully commemorated milestones in secret. On camera, birthdays, anniversaries, and minor accomplishments were celebrated with flawless laughs and grins. But anxiety was rising beneath that well-manicured facade. Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel TLC Flicks. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Robyn's gaze frequently lingered on opportunities beyond the family business, on endeavors that offered independence, wealth, and influence. But at a price Kody was still unable to comprehend. Kody started to notice a change in Robyn's behavior, even though he still believed in their relationship. Without him, decisions were being made. He had conversations with outsiders that he believed to be private. Even though she appeared to be loyal and loving, the seeds of something darker had already been planted. Love served as a shield for Kody, a power that allowed him to overlook his misgivings and the tiny warning signs. However, the first fractures in the flawless image had started to show in the shadows of their glitzy existence. What the public perceived as a fairy tale marriage was actually the brittle exterior of a storm that was subtly building in intensity and would soon explode with unimaginable repercussions. Kody sits in the family room late at night, looking at pictures of their best times as the chapter comes to a close. His heart is briefly unsettled, a murmur he cannot yet identify. The first tremors of treachery are starting to disturb the foundation of the flawless illusion, which has held for years. Kody started to notice aspects that he had previously missed, or maybe refused to see, in the weeks after the bad feeling from that late night. They appeared to be little at first. A bank statement that didn't add up, a missing invoice, and a late payment. He assured himself that the mistakes were minor and could be readily explained. However, the anomalies increased in number as the days went by. Money was transferred with no justification. Without any explanation, investments only showed up in Robyn's name. Subtle alterations were made to family property contracts that he had not approved. He hoped that every discovery was really an error, but a persistent voice in his head warned that something was wrong. A tea first. He approached Robyn nonchalantly, disguising his worry with interest. One morning, expecting a simple yes, he questioned, "Did you handle the payments for the new property?" She promised him that everything would be taken care of with a serene, trouble-free grin. However, there was a hesitancy, a glint of something he couldn't quite read in her gaze, a slight shift that unnerved him. Kody attempted to justify his skepticism. Perhaps he was having hallucinations. Perhaps he had been overly watchful due to the strain of running a sizable, intricate family business. But there was no denying the trend. Every oddity and inexplicable behavior started to take the shape of a map, a trail that implied Robyn's goals were no longer in line with the family's unity. He felt the pressure of suspicion at the end of the week. He meticulously tracked every transaction, staying up at night to examine contracts and documents by lamplight. With every hour that went by, the disparity tightened into a knot in his chest. Like a beautiful glass sculpture perched on the edge of a shelf, the affection and trust he had long depended on were beginning to seem brittle. The unmistakable clue suddenly appeared, a paper in Robyn's hand that amply demonstrated that assets had been moved without his knowledge. It wasn't merely an error, it was a conscious decision that completely avoided him. Kody's heart fell. The delusion of their ideal life started to disintegrate before his eyes as the first unmistakable proof of treachery arrived. He glanced at Robyn, who remained composed, her face tranquil, almost placid. He felt cold. The first indicator was a proclamation rather than merely a warning. There was a fundamental shift. He no longer believed that he and her shared the same life. And for the first time, Kody understood that the fight that lay ahead would be much more terrible and personal than he had ever dreamed. The night Kody learned the truth, the uneasiness that had been eating away at him for weeks exploded into a hurricane. What started out as little irregularities, the ill-placed remarks, the inexplicable transfers, now turned out to be a purposeful pattern of dishonesty. When he got home on a calm evening, expecting to find some serenity, he discovered the living room covered in papers, deeds, contracts, bank records, and legal documents, all of which pointed to a horrifying reality. Robyn had been discreetly destroying the empire they had created together, transferring properties under her control, moving assets, and diverting finances. Each document was a blow, proof that the lady he had most trusted had cheated on him. Kody slumped in a chair and rummaged through the papers, his hands shaking. Contracts and numbers blended together, but the narrative was unmistakable. This was not an omission or error. It was intentional, calculated with care, planned in advance. Kody had become a pawn in Robyn's long-term game, rather than a player. He saw flashbacks to their childhood, the shared dreams, the joy, the promises of eternity. He had thought that no storm could be overcome by love alone. On the other hand, that love was now the reason the betrayal was so painful. Now, every trust and every memory was tarnished. He felt the weight of the situation bearing down on him. This was about more than simply money now. It was about honor, legacy, and the basis of their family. In the quiet moments, away from cameras and spectators, Kody recognized that the partnership he had fostered and the life he had taken for granted had been compromised. He felt a mixture of amazement, rage, and sadness. He knew he needed to exercise caution, but he still wanted to confront Robyn right away and demand answers. It took strategy, not emotion, to realize the full scope of her deeds. Every action she had taken had been planned. Each answer would have to be just as exact. Kody sat among the strewn papers as the night grew darker, the burden of betrayal bearing down on him. His ideal life with Robyn had been destroyed, and he was unsure of how to move on. There was no denying that the game had changed, and his greatest enemy was now the woman he had trusted and loved. The finding was finished. The delusion has vanished. Kody was aware that nothing would ever be the same again, including his family, kingdom, and love. The day of reckoning came like a terrible, unavoidable storm on the horizon. Kody had practiced his speech, calibrated his voice, and anticipated every response. However, nothing could adequately prepare him to confront Robyn once the entire scope of her treachery was exposed. In the brightly illuminated living room, he discovered her, serene and collected, the image of peace that had once comforted him. It simply made the sting worse now. The lady he had put his complete trust in, the companion he had thought would support him through every difficulty, now appeared impenetrable, almost untouchably uncaring. "Kody," she replied quietly, almost nonchalantly, as though nothing had altered. However, Kody experienced a rush of emotion that was relentless, combining fury, hurt, and bewilderment. He steadied himself. "Robyn, I had faith in you. Our entire family, our fortune, our dreams, all we built is gone. How were you able to?" She gave a cool, almost businesslike response. "It's not personal, Kody. I've made decisions that were essential. You ought to look at the wider picture." He felt the words like ice. Not intimate, not affection, just ambition, plan, and calculation. The closeness they had experienced, the connection he had treasured, was diminished to business dealings and icy reasoning. Although Kody's heart hurt, a new resolution was burning behind the anguish. This goes beyond business. This is about love, commitment, and trust. And that is no longer there. Robyn's face showed no signs of weakness. She didn't recoil. She didn't say sorry. Kody came to terms with the fact that the person he had loved for decades had changed into someone he could no longer identify. The encounter was existential rather than merely emotional. It outlined their current identities as well as what their future might or might not hold. Once allies and witnesses to their union, family members now discreetly observed the long-developing rift. Tension, unsaid words, and the weight of a shared past now tainted by dishonesty pervaded the air. That day, Kody walked out of the meeting with a steely resolve but a heavy heart. Everything had been clear after the confrontation. There was no going back. The consequences were severe. The treachery was genuine, and the battle for justice, both legal and personal, was unavoidable. One thing was clear in the ensuing quiet. Trust had been broken, love had been ruined, and a new era of struggle, introspection, and drastic upheaval was about to start. Particularly in the realm of reality television, no secret remains undiscovered for long. Days after the altercation, rumors started to circulate. Friends felt uneasy, staff observed tension, and devoted fans began to piece together what had transpired behind closed doors. The topic first surfaced as speculations before making headlines in entertainment news and social media. The headline read, "Kody and Robyn's empire in shambles." Another cautioned, "Betrayal in the Brown household." Fans shocked. Kody was shocked to see his personal sadness turned into a public event. Fans, media outlets, and cameras flocked to the family, seeking drama, information, and evidence of the betrayal. Everyone was now amused by the private suffering of a duped guy. Kody found it difficult to handle the barrage of attention, but Robyn stayed calm and virtually unaffected by the spotlight. Every word he spoke, every look he made on camera, was broken down, examined, and disseminated. As one of reality TV's most devastating betrayals played out in real time, the entire world turned into a judge and jury. Supporters were split. Others sympathized with Kody, appalled that a dependable partner could ruin a family tradition. Others questioned Kody's judgment and praised Robyn's ambition as they conjectured about her motivations. There were a lot of theories, arguments, and fury on social media. More than just a personal tragedy, the controversy had evolved into a cultural spectacle and a warning story that was aired to millions of people. The public scandal was an additional source of pain for Kody. The humiliation of having the world witness that treachery was nearly intolerable, on top of the fact that he had been deceived in the most personal manner imaginable. His invested affection and trust were now being flaunted in front of strangers as entertainment and conversation starters. But in the middle of the mayhem, he felt a surge of resolve. He was not defined by the scandal. Even though the betrayal was painful, it was not the end of the story. Kody understood that he needed to take back control of his story, his family, and his possessions if he desired justice. The struggle that had started in the shadows was now in the public eye, and Kody's next actions would decide not just how his private conflict turned out, but also the story that the public would never forget. A new stage of drama, conflict, and tragedy had been set with the start of the public scandal. As Kody got ready to face the full depth of betrayal, the entire globe watched in awe, and the battle was just getting started. The public uproar caused Kody to withdraw into silence for a few days. In the privacy of his own home, the cameras, the news, and the opinions of millions of people didn't matter. He was alone as he faced the extent of the betrayal and the empty space where trust and affection had previously existed. Every picture, recollection, and artifact from their common history served as a painful reminder of what was gone. Once cozy and reassuring, family get-togethers now felt like stages where every smile was framed by the shadow of dishonesty. Even places you knew well, rooms that were lively and full of laughter, felt strange because of Robyn's actions. Kody traced the lines of rooms that contained decades' worth of memories as he strolled around the house they had constructed together. He was unable to share or shake the unseen burden of loss that weighed heavy on his shoulders. Nights were long and plagued by flashbacks, by times when he had unwittingly trusted the wrong person, and sleep was elusive. Beneath the surface, anger coiled itself firmly around his heart. In addition to Robyn, he was angry at the brittleness of trust, the delusion of permanence, and a life he believed to be safe but was suddenly falling apart in front of him. Nevertheless, a silent resolve started to grow despite the suffering. Kody understood that sorrow was insufficient on its own. It was vital to lament the loss of stability, love, and companionship, yet it was insufficient. He would have to take action, to plan, to confront, and finally to fight back if he wished to take back his life. Alone with himself, he made plans. Financial audits, legal advice, meticulous documentation, all the instruments of justice were his friends. Every action was planned, methodical, and intended to preserve what was left and restore what had been taken. He felt lonely, nevertheless, even as he got ready. Betrayal is a personal injury that is difficult to discuss or recover from. Kody's seclusion turned into a furnace that tried his heart while strengthening his resolve. At the chapter's conclusion, Kody sat in the darkness, gazing at a picture of better days, and he muttered to himself that although he would never be able to get back the love he had lost, the struggle for justice, dignity, and the truth had only just begun. The aftermath was an emotional battleground, a furnace of suffering and fortitude. The next chapter of this story, which promised confrontation, revelation, and the unrelenting quest of justice, would be driven by the fire that was ignited in Kody's loneliness. Kody had found clarity in solitude. Once intense and overwhelming, the grief of betrayal has subsided into a resolute resolve. He had to assert his claim to justice with his own hands, his own thoughts, and all the guile he possessed. He could no longer rely on hope or trust. In order to create a thorough map of Robyn's activities, he started by painstakingly cataloging every irregularity, including bank transfers, property deeds, and legal documents. Every detail, no matter how minor, was meticulously documented. This battle was now one of facts, evidence, and strategy rather than feelings. One of his closest buddies was legal counsel. Hour-long meetings were held while Kody examined each contract and transaction in an effort to find the leverage he needed to recover what had been stolen. Attorneys cautioned him about the intricacy, the media attention, and the potential for personal assaults, but Kody remained unfazed. He would respond relentlessly. The betrayal had been intentional. Kody thought about the court of public opinion outside the courtroom. Though he was aware that narrative was important, the scandal had already garnered attention. It would be necessary to carefully consider every word, every action, and every interview to make sure that the truth, his truth, rose above rumors and sensationalism. This was a battle waged on the legal, private, and public fronts. Kody assessed his own internal resources as well. His plan now included friends, relatives, and allies who had seen the minor flaws in Robyn's behavior. Their insights, recollections, and encouragement would bolster his case. He understood that trust now needed to be carefully calibrated and aimed at people who shared his conception of fairness. IT was a mentally and emotionally taxing procedure, but it made him more determined. Kody was no longer the man who was taken by surprise and left feeling betrayed. He was turning into a force of measured resolve, intent on regaining authority, honor, and the life he had created rather than seeking vengeance out of rage. Kody's plan, which included careful documentation, legal preparation, and deliberate public message, was beginning to take shape by the end of the chapter. Every action was planned, every step intended to thwart Robyn's strategies. Once passionate and reactive, the clash was now turning into a purposeful campaign, an unavoidable encounter where truth and justice would demand their place. The flame that had been kindled in the wake of treachery had now been refined into a weapon. Kody was prepared. Robyn's deceit had set the scene, but he would be the one to pull off the next stunt. The world would be watching, and the battle was now about when rather than if. The time had come. This was the culmination of months of preparation, deceit, and treachery. Kody and Robyn would cross paths, not as lovers or partners, but as enemies engaged in a conflict between loyalty, love, and legacy. The mood was electric, tight, and on the verge of a storm. Long sensed but dreaded, family members hovered close by, mute witnesses to a confrontation. Every movement felt like a prelude to fight, and every look bore weight. Kody came in, steely determination mixed with restrained rage. Nothing could really prepare him for confronting the person who had once been the center of his life, even though he had practiced the encounter in his imagination innumerable times. Robyn stood erect, her serene manner a stark contrast to the raging fury within him. "You've taken everything," Kody stated in a steady but painfully sharpened voice. "All of it is gone. The love, the trust, the life we created." "Why?" Robyn gave a calm, almost icy reaction. "You don't get it, Kody. I've made decisions that were essential. You have the incorrect perspective on this." The words were piercing and unforgiving. The closeness they had experienced, the connection he had treasured, had been diminished to ambition and justification. He could no longer recognize the person he had loved. Anger erupted, only subdued by years of meticulous self-control. Kody's subsequent remarks were purposeful and intended to highlight the seriousness of her acts as well as the extent of his betrayal. Money and property are not the only issues here. This concerns loyalty, trust, and the breakdown of a deeply meaningful marriage. There is no turning back the line you have crossed. Robyn maintained her poise, which was unervingly steady. She had expected this encounter, and her composure was both a weapon and a shield. Even her cool-headedness, however, was unable to change the fact that the confrontation was now inevitable, visible, and irrevocable. As the tension increased, family members observed. Every motion alluded to the past that had brought them to this moment. Every word had repercussions, and every look sent a lot of information. More than just a personal conflict, the altercation symbolized a love shattered, a legacy endangered, and an impending fight for justice. It became evident at the end of the battle that nothing would be the same again. Their relationship, which had been founded on love, had become a battlefield characterized by treachery, cunning, and survival as a result of the encounter. Kody's determination solidified as he walked out of the room. The altercation had established the tone for future court cases, public scrutiny, and an unrelenting quest for justice. Robyn's deceit had been the initial shot, but Kody now had the will, clarity, and resolve to take back what had been taken. Robyn's well-crafted facade started to show cracks as the court disputes and public attention intensified. Behind her serene exterior was a web of decisions and connections Kody had never thought of. The plot was a tapestry of ambition, deceit, and treachery built over months or perhaps years, and each new discovery added a new layer. Kody's legal team discovered documents that showed transactions, transfers, and property purchases that were carried out without his knowledge. Subtle secrets, however, were beyond the financial scheming. These included emails that demonstrated a planned effort to consolidate power and control, as well as relationships with advisors and family friends who had supported her conduct. The treachery became more profound with each new revelation, turning it from a personal tragedy into a planned campaign. Already enthralled, the media and fans were enthralled with the drama that was developing. Every document that was leaked and every secret disclosure made headlines. Supporters of Kody banded together online, analyzing every action, covert correspondence, and financial ploy. Once ambiguous, Robyn's motivations started to become evident to the public: ambition, independence, and the will to succeed at all costs. Kody, meanwhile, put in endless effort to put the whole picture together. Although it took a tremendous emotional toll, the insight it provided fortified his determination. What had once appeared to be isolated betrayals now constituted a purposeful pattern, a well-thought-out scheme to alter the family's riches and erode the trust that had previously held them together. Even the closest members of the family had to face hard realities. Long-held beliefs about love, loyalty, and trust disintegrated when alliances changed and allegiances were called into doubt. What was once a cohesive family was now a battleground of covert plans and secrets. Kody came to the realization that the battle was no longer solely about protecting one's reputation or regaining property. It had turned into a struggle for the truth itself, for his legacy, for the integrity of his life, and for the story that the public would tell. One thing was evident when the chapter came to an end. The curtain of secrecy had been lifted. Now that Robyn's game was out, the way forward was determined by strategy, clarity, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The tale of betrayal and love had evolved into a tale of power, disclosure, and repercussions that would affect everyone. No treachery could put out the fire that the discoveries had stoked inside Kody. He was forced to fight for his fortune and legacy, as well as for his family, his dignity, and the truth itself. After Robyn's deeds, her covert affiliations, and the willful destruction of their shared existence were revealed. Teams of lawyers were working nonstop. Every transaction, document, and recorded discussion was used as ammo in a carefully thought-out battle. Knowing that this battle was as much about strategy as it was about emotion, Kody moved with accuracy. Every legal action was planned with the goal of recovering what had been taken and making Robyn answerable for her deeds. However, justice was not limited to courts. The conflict spread into the public sphere when fans, the media, and social media unintentionally joined in. Kody used well-planned remarks, interviews, and appearances to tell his narrative without letting the sensationalism around him get the better of him. Every move and every phrase was intentional, a rebuttal to the narrative Robyn had tried to steer. Kody had to fight the hardest battle of all, regaining his personal feeling of peace amid the legal wrangling and public statements. Betrayal pierces the foundation of identity and trust, going beyond the loss of money or prestige. Nevertheless, Kody developed an unwavering resolve in the furnace of sorrow, rage, and revelation. He refused to let dishonesty define him or dictate his course in life. He was surrounded by allies, even those who had previously adored Robyn. Friends, family, and even onlookers began to see the full scope of her behavior. Kody's position was reinforced by support and advice, which showed that the battle was not fought alone but rather with honesty and integrity. Kody accepted the full weight of the battle ahead as the judicial conflicts drew closer and the public's attention grew. A reckoning had been brought about by Robyn's premeditated deception, and he was willing to see it through to the finish. Every action was a component of a bigger plan, each step was deliberate, and each choice was informed by a distinct goal: recover what had been taken, bring about justice, and come out of the experience with his integrity untarnished. It was evident at the end of the chapter that the drama was about to enter its most pivotal stage. The pursuit of justice was now active, unrelenting, and comprehensive rather than merely theoretical. From a man who had been deceived, Kody had become a force that was desperate to take back his life. The legacy, dignity, and truth he battled for would live on, but the damaged love could never be rebuilt. Kody came to understand that he was not alone in the struggle for justice. Beneath the facade of treachery and deceit, there were supporters, individuals who had surreptitiously watched Robyn's goals and behavior and now understood that they had to support him. These were the unseen allies, those whose devotion and wisdom may change the outcome of the conflict. Family members who had been entangled in the web of deceit for a long time started to divulge their knowledge. Little deeds, hushed exchanges, and perceptive observations created a patchwork of proof that Kody might use. Formerly aloof or unsupportive friends came forward to provide encouragement, direction, and evidence to back up his allegations. Kody found professional supporters even outside the familial group, including investigators, financial specialists, and lawyers who were adept at traversing the complex web Robyn had woven. Their knowledge unveiled covert transfers, nuanced adjustments, and hitherto unnoticed links, completing the picture of Robyn's meticulously planned strategies. Sensing the change in pace, Robyn was wary. As Kody's covert network bolstered his position, her composed manner started to show signs of weakness. Her seemingly unbreakable plan was now under the scrutiny and coordination of a resolute opponent equipped with facts, allies, and unwavering commitment. The dynamics of the family were also altered by the discovery of hidden allies. Where there had been silence, relationships changed, allegiances were put to the test, and rumors of the truth started to spread. In addition to legal authority, Kody's strength was bolstered by the combined wisdom and bravery of those who had waited for the ideal opportunity to take action. By the end of the chapter, it was evident that the power dynamics were shifting. The war was backed by facts, proof, and the silent but powerful force of allies who refused to watch injustice happen. It was no longer one guy against a cunning foe. Kody no longer had to go it alone to achieve justice. He had a team of allies who were waiting for the right opportunity to intervene. Never before had the stakes been so high. A new pivotal stage in the fight for truth, legacy, and vindication was beginning as Robyn's empire of deceit came to light. Kody sensed his position solidifying when Robyn counterattacked. At start, it was subtle: legal wrangling, press releases, and strategically placed social media posts. But it quickly became unrelenting. Every action was planned to refute Kody's assertions, cast doubt on his intentions, and undermine the coalitions he had built. Robyn's legal team countered the evidence, arguing that Kody was overreacting to miscommunications, contesting ownership, and casting doubt on the validity of the transactions. Her public remarks were composed, assured, and intended to cast doubt while preserving the air of poise. Insatiably drama-hungry, the media magnified the story, generating fan conjecture and discussion. But Kody was not unprepared. Every strategy she used had been foreseen, and his covert allies offered assistance and intelligence to offset her actions. He now used the carefully collected evidence as a shield. Witness accounts, financial documents, and recorded interactions made up a strong defense. But navigating the emotional stakes was more difficult. Robyn's retaliation was personal as well as legal and monetary. Her deliberate remarks, outward displays, and subliminal clues were intended to frighten him and upset the emotional center that gave him strength. In the midst of the chaos of deceit and manipulation, Kody had to battle not only in courtrooms but also within himself, keeping his composure, discipline, and clarity. The strain also changed the dynamics of the family. Some family members changed their minds about supporting Robyn after being influenced by her. Others redoubled their efforts, passionately supporting Kody. The conflict had evolved from one over property to one over loyalty, trust, and the story that would define their family's legacy. By the end of the chapter, the counterattack had heightened the tension and put Kody's preparations to the test in every way. However, it also made clear an important fact: Robyn's strength, albeit great, was not unqualified. Thanks to careful planning and covert allies, Kody's plan was able to resist the attack. The pursuit of justice has entered a perilous, high-stakes stage in which every choice, action, and disclosure may determine whether victory or loss. The conflict was far from ended. In this epic storyline, each side was now fully armed, fully dedicated, and well aware that the conclusion would define not only who owned the assets but also the story of justice, love, and betrayal. Kody had been on the defensive for weeks, reacting to Robyn's counterattacks with methodical planning and steady concentration. Now, however, the first fissures appeared in her armor. It was no longer possible to disregard the opportunities created by little errors, forgotten details, and the underestimated might of Kody's supporters. The first piece of information was a secret document that Robyn had thought was buried, but that Kody's legal team had suddenly found. It exposed contradictions in her statements, proof of transfers made without her consent, and deceptive tactics that damaged her reputation. Kody and his supporters were invigorated by the revelation, which transformed months of defense into the initial stages of attack. Public opinion also started to change. After becoming enthralled by Robyn's calm counterattacks, fans began to wonder about her intentions. The truth behind the lie was gradually exposed by the arguments, analyses, and leaks from Kody's side that dominated social media. Once securely in Robyn's grasp, the momentum was now beginning to falter. Kody experienced a renewed sense of emotional strength. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks everyone.